this out of the curriculum. This is freaking ridiculous. Telling people they have to be on pins and needles, not being able to do anything. It's just like you have to see somebody of whatever race or religion just crawl into a ball and cry yourself to sleep. It's completely ridiculous. Another thing that's ridiculous, as we're talking a lot in the news about discrimination, you guys know the stories. Well, you don't need me to go through all of them. But now this is a new form of discrimination. It reminds me of an old episode of King of the Hill. They're talking about discrimination. The mom was talking to the son, and the son says, well, how does your policy help women with big boobies? She says, son, women with large breasts don't need any help. Well, they need help now. A woman gets asked to leave a gym because her boobs are too large. And basically, employees came up to her. They said that people were feeling uncomfortable because the woman's breasts were so large. And we will show you this. Cover your eyes. We got the children in the room, I guess. I can't help that my chest may appear large. I felt humiliated. I felt that I was uncomfortable and I was made to leave. And basically on her way out the door, she asked the other women in the club if her attire offended them. I mean, yes, the lady is very busty, but she wasn't dressed inappropriate from my personal opinion. And the other women in the club said, no, we don't have any issue with you. And basically the woman you saw there concluded it was the women, 2 women supervisors, and she pointed that out, that they were females, who basically were forcing her to get out the club because they didn't like the fact that she was endowed. So you can take that for what you will. I know that's more of a lighthearted story, but coming up after this break, we'll have a very serious conversation with Conchita Sarnoff about human trafficking. But before that, I want to remind you to check out the hashtag InfoWars gear and upload your InfoWars picks for a chance to win big bucks. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break. You've heard the names, Seville, Sandusky, and now Epstein. And now our guest today is going to talk about Elise Epstein in her new book, Traffic King, which is available on ConchitaSarnoff.com. She is Conchita Sarnoff, and she is the executive director of the Alliance to Rescue Victims of Trafficking. And thank you for joining us today, Conchita.
Thank you, Jakari. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the book, Traffic King?
Yes, certainly. Well, the book came about as a result of my investigation. As you might know, I run a foundation in Washington, Alliance to Rescue Victims of Trafficking, which hopes to raise awareness and has been raising awareness of the issue of human trafficking in the United States. And as a result of my investigation into various human trafficking cases, I stumbled into the Epstein case unexpectedly. What was even more unexpected was the fact that I know Mr. Epstein and Miss Maxwell, who is the alleged procurer, who has been deposed, I believe, already by one of the former victims, Virginia Louise Roberts. And there's a pending case in New York, Virginia Louise Roberts versus Ghislaine Maxwell. It's a defamation case, a civil case. So based on my research about the issue of human trafficking, and based on the fact that I knew Miss Maxwell and Mr. Epstein socially, I was stunned, number one, that I even knew people that could supposedly, purportedly commit such heinous crimes, and two, that people actually committed these crimes. So that, of course, spiraled into a very long, protracted investigation. And 7 years later, I finally published the book. I don't know if you're aware, but 27 publishers turned down my original manuscript. I have gone through 3 agents who all worked very hard to have my book published, and no one would publish the book. That is without even seeing the manuscript. All they saw was, of course, a synopsis. And given the reasons that I was told by my agents, primarily it was fear of a Clinton presidency and fear of litigation, of course, both by Mr. Epstein and some of the characters implicated in Mr. Epstein's case. So there began this very long investigation. And this, as you might know, has been blasted across the media since 2010. The story first appeared in 2006, about a year after Mr. Epstein was arrested. He was arrested in Palm Beach in 2005. because one girl came forward to the Palm Beach Police Department. After that girl came forward, it sort of spiraled, and I think over 100 victims came forward to the police, and more than 40 depositions, sworn statements were taken independently and individually.
Now, I'm sorry, I got to interrupt you there, Conchita. Now, with all the people that came forward, are you saying they came forward against Epstein?
Correct. That is
wow.
correct. And these were all underage girls. That means all under the age of 18. So in Florida, the age of sexual consent is 18. So these girls who came forward, some came forward with their parents, others came forward independently. And a case began, of course, by the Palm Beach Police Department. Chief Michael Ritter, who was the chief of police at the Palm Beach Police Department at the time, was in charge of this case with Officer Joe Recaray. And there began a long 2-year investigation in which there was a grand jury, and then finally there was an FBI investigation, at which point the United States Attorney's Office, Mr. Alex Acosta, who was the prosecutor at the time, believed that there was sufficient evidence for the federal government to go forward into an investigation. Well, Mr. Epstein, who, as you know, is a Wall Street billionaire, registered sex offender level 3, hired a slew of absolutely star quality attorneys, including Mr. Kenneth Starr, who was the Solicitor General during the Bill Clinton impeachment and during the former president's Monica Lewinsky scandal. He was hired toward the very end of the negotiations. So was Alan Dershowitz, who actually was a friend of Mr. Epstein and was implicated in the case. And of course, you will read about all of this in the book. The book is called Trafficking. And other attorneys, other very prominent attorneys, were Roy Black, Gerald Lefcourt, Martin Weinberger, and Jay Lefkowitz. And so here you have a star team of attorneys representing Mr. Epstein against dozens of underage girls who, of course, did not have the wherewithal, the resources, the financial resources to fight Mr. Epstein, certainly not civilly. And finally, the prosecution agreed that if Mr. Epstein agreed to one count of solicitation of prostitution with a minor, that means that the minor who came forward was identified as a prostitute, which I find unbelievable. Then if he would agree to that one count, and then there was another count, so there were in total 2 counts out of the multiple counts that he was originally charged with. If he agreed with that, then it would not be a federal case. So this became a state case, and he was sentenced to 18 months in a county jail, plus an additional 18 months under house arrest. He served only 13 months in Palm Beach County Jail, not a federal prison, and consecutively with 18 months of house arrest in his Palm Beach estate. So I think the reason this is important, one of the reasons, Jakari, this case is so important, is because it has set precedent. Here you have a 2-year-long federal investigation. The alleged trafficker, Mr. Epstein, is indicted or given one count one count of solicitation of prostitution with a minor. He's given a non-prosecution agreement. He serves a minimum amount of time compared to other human traffickers who have been arrested with similar charges. And now several other human traffickers who have been arrested since Mr. Epstein was arrested have been using Mr. Epstein's case as precedent. We have one case in particular in Miami, Florida. The attorney, Joel DeFabio, is representing a convicted pedophile. Well, he is in the process of being convicted. He was arrested, and his name, ironically, is Michael Archangel Hernandez. And this case is moving forward, and they are using, Mr. DeFabio has used Mr. Epstein's defense in order to have his client receive a lesser sentence.
Yes, Conchita, I'm sorry, we're low on time, but people can definitely find out the rest of the information in Traffic King. Now, briefly, before we end, can you tell us about your organization, the Alliance to Rescue Victims of Trafficking?
Absolutely. My organization raises awareness of human trafficking. I have a board. A number of former government officials are on my board, and community leaders, former ambassadors as well, and current ambassadors. And what we attempt to do is two things. Number one, raise awareness of the issue by one of the campaigns that we have is called Alert and Educated. We are trying to distribute for free an educational PowerPoint presentation to over 15,000 school districts that will help children and students and teachers and administrators learn how traffickers identify and recruit victims today, because it's no
now,
longer...
Conchita, can you hold that thought? We'll hold you over, and we'll come back right after this break. All right, and welcome back. Our guest is Conchita Sarnoff with the book Traffic King. Conchita, you were cut off by the break, and you were telling us about your organization, the Alliance to Rescue Victims of Trafficking.
Yes, thank you. As I was saying, the situation with, forgive me, something happened here. As I was saying, what we are attempting to do, what the foundation is attempting to do, is to raise awareness of the issue of human trafficking. And also, we would like to open the first safe house to rescue victims in the Washington, D.C. area. Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, does not have a safe house. One of the biggest problems and one of the biggest reasons why victims today do not come forward as easily as they should is because they have nowhere to go after they come forward. So if they're arrested, then they're let out on the street. Mm-hmm. If they're not arrested and they escape from their traffickers, they have usually nowhere to go. Do they go back home where the problem began, usually? Or do they stay out in the street? Or do they have a friend where they can live with? I mean, it's an enormous problem. You see all these movies. There's a movie that just came out, The Abolitionist, a fantastic documentary about what's going on in the world of human trafficking. But guess what? It's all filmed abroad, in Haiti, in Colombia, in Mexico. Why do they not film that documentary in the United States when the problem is so prevalent in this country? According to Congress in 2012, over 300,000 American children were trafficked. According to the United Nations, 22 million children are trafficked. I mean, we don't have accurate numbers, as you might know, because the first point of defense is always the police department. So for the police to have an accurate figure, an accurate count of the number of victims in each district, in each area, they have to arrest the victim. And then they have to know that that victim is a trafficked victim and not anything else. So it is a very complicated problem, and nobody has really drilled down to the very root of this problem, which is, why are there so many children being trafficked? Well, one reason certainly is the increase in child pornography. As you know, pornography today is the largest business online, and child pornography is the second largest business online. Thirdly, this whole issue of pedophilia. Some researchers want to describe the issue of pedophilia as just another sexual orientation. Well, is it really a sexual orientation?
Yeah, we see groups like, I believe it was Salon, just to cut in briefly, they keep putting out these articles trying to normalize pedophilia.
Yes, exactly. And I was reading, there's now a very interesting, several articles have come out now about this medication, which is currently being used for prostate cancer, for advanced prostate cancer. And in Sweden, the Karolinska Institute is actually trying, they've brought in 60 pedophiles, of which they're going to give this medication, Degarolex, I believe is the name, and the Swiss pharmaceutical that produces the medication is called Ferring. And they're going to give the medication to 30 of those 60 pedophiles, and the other 30 are simply going to receive a placebo. And so they're going to study the effects of the medication. One of the reasons some of these medications